In Jurassic Park, when Dr. Ian Malcolm explains chaos theory, he says, quite simply, that it's like when a butterfly flaps its wings in Peking and you get rain instead of sunshine in Central Park. What on earth did he mean? Well, chaos theory is about unpredictability in complex systems, and this fascinating branch of mathematics is causing a bit of a storm in economics, as well as in New York and in a dinosaur park off the coast of Costa Rica. You see, economic systems share many characteristics with the complex dynamic systems that chaos theory describes. Economies are subject to tiny fluctuations, changes in consumer sentiment, supply chain disruptions, or minor policy adjustments that can snowball into large, unpredictable economic shifts. But the economic models we use often assume a large degree of predictability. Conventional, boring old neoclassical economists used to believe that the market will move almost instantly to equilibrium. Prices will adjust to ensure that excesses and shortages are quickly resolved. It's not hard to visualize. If hotcakes are selling like hotcakes, then the supplier can probably ramp up the price. But the neoclassicists went further. Leon Walras proved mathematically, using simultaneous equations, that not only would the local town market clear, but that every market for goods and services and labor across the entire economy would clear. The conclusion was that the whole economy would quickly reach the most efficient allocation of goods and services, as long as the government stayed out of the way. But that's not what people saw happening. Business cycles had been recorded since Moses prophesied in the Bible 7 years of plenty and 7 years of famine. And in the 1930s, the Great Depression clearly demonstrated how markets could find themselves locked in a destructive spiral. To deal with this, John Maynard Keynes published his General Theory of Employment, Interest and Money. His central idea was that governments must intervene to prevent a downward economic spiral. His theories and interventionist policy recommendations were successfully adopted by almost every government in the post-war period. But Keynes and his followers struggled to develop a mathematical foundation for their ideas. Is that important? Well, it's less important than government action, and that governments intervene to prevent the economy collapsing into depression with mass unemployment and the terrible human costs that follow. But by the 20th century, economics had evolved into a science. Its ideas were increasingly expressed in mathematical terms, which allowed theories to be clearly defined, tested, and ultimately proven or disproven. Without firm mathematical foundations, Keynesians were always at a disadvantage when debating with the neoclassical economists. But chaos theory changed that. Chaos theory showed that when there is a non-linear feedback loop, then you don't always move back to equilibrium, and that can have a big impact on the economy. Take labor, for example, and when I say labor, I mean all the workers in an economy. Labor isn't just a cost of production, it is also the main driver of consumption. That means if employers lay off workers or reduce their wages because they think a recession is coming, then they might actually cause a recession by causing a drop in demand. Let's look at how this works. Under classical economics, there is a simple process where if producers reduce supply, then prices will rise, and that will encourage supply to increase again. There is a constant state of flux causing quantities and prices to swing back and forward like a pendulum. But pretty soon the economy will come to rest at equilibrium unless something else knocks it again. But under the Keynesian system, a drop in supply may or may not cause a drop in demand. Supply and demand are dependent on each other and interact in a complex way. That is similar to a double pendulum, where a second pendulum is hung below a traditional pendulum. Now, I don't know what other purposes a double pendulum has in the real world, but it is very good at demonstrating chaos. With a double pendulum, the motion of the two arms are interconnected and dependent on each other. The movement of the first pendulum affects the second, and vice versa. This creates complex and often unpredictable behavior. At times, the pendulums swing in harmony. At others, they move out of sync. To see this, let's have a look at the video. To begin with, you can see just one double pendulum, but there are in fact 3 identical pendulums with starting positions deviating by just 1 degree. But despite the tiny differential, we can see how very quickly the outcomes diverge and become erratic, even though each pendulum acts in a linear manner. The movement of the first pendulum influences the motion of the second and vice versa. It is a classic example of a chaotic system. It looks random, but it isn't. Now let's look at a little maths. And don't be scared off. There are 1 or 2 equations, but you can probably ignore them, and I think the concepts are still quite clear. I am going to use a simple-ish chaotic system that generates a parabola. Okay, let's demonstrate how feedback works. If we start at A, then we can see that the function generates B. Then, with feedback we use B to generate C, C to generate D, and so on. In our simplified example, you can see how this would generate a path, A, B, C, D, E, and so on. But what does that look like with a real equation and with real numbers? Well, taking a simple quadratic equation, like the one on screen, we can generate the parabola, and this is simply a visual representation of the equation. Then, similar to before, if you take the starting position 0.5, then you get 1, 0, 0, 0, and so on. When the input is 0, the output is always going to be 0 and our trajectory flatlines. Not very chaotic, is it? But this is the interesting bit. Like the double pendulum, if you change your starting position by the smallest increment to 0.501, then you get the following sequence. Now let's plot that in a graph. You can see the chaos quite clearly. A small change has a huge impact on the outcome, and there is no sign of the path settling down into equilibrium. It is chaotic, but it's not random. It is deterministic, and the path of this sequence and the double pendulums can be predicted if you know the relevant function and starting point. Okay, so what are the takeaways? Well, chaos theory offers an amazing insight into how complex systems with feedback, like the economy and stock market, don't always behave in neat, predictable ways. It shows us that the economy doesn't necessarily move back to equilibrium by itself. It can oscillate, lurch, and spiral. And this gives us our first takeaway. There is a strong case for government intervention, not to control every movement, but to help stabilize an otherwise erratic system. The second takeaway is chaos is not randomness. These swings are predictable. With the correct models, in theory, it is possible to forecast the future trajectory of the economy and take early action to offset any downturns. However, the third takeaway is perhaps the most important, and it calls for caution. Yes, chaotic systems are deterministic, but they're also incredibly sensitive. Tiny nudges can have massive consequences. A well-meaning policy tweak might help, or it might push the system past a tipping point and make things worse. Clearly, we still have a lot to learn, and chaos theory isn't a magic solution. But it offers a truly fascinating window into how economic systems really work and real hope for a better future understanding. A link for the next video should be on your screen now. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, then please like, subscribe, and comment. Thanks for watching.